I'm more than prepared to go into regional communities, including coal-based communities, and talk about the future and the challenges of the future and the fact that 70% of our trading partners are moving to net zero emissions. And that'll really change the way our coal industry works into the future. We need to be honest and clear about that. What we're not prepared to do is say, well, we're going to shut down an Australian coal market and other countries will fulfil that void. The coal-fired power stations in other countries will continue to operate as long as their policies enable them to. And if we shut down our coal exports tomorrow, as the Greens would have us do, all that would happen, there would not be one reduction in emissions.
The comments come ahead of a looming state by-election in the coal-rich Hunter Valley in New South Wales. 6 Adani-sized coal mines have been proposed for the region, which is also a fertile agricultural plain. Labor has also rejected a call by former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull, who owns land in the Hunter Valley, for a moratorium on new coal mines. Kate Ellis, what's going on here? We have Opposition Resources spokeswoman saying that it's time for a mature conversation. We need to have a mature debate about transition. Does that actually just mean taking it easy and making sure we don't upset the Queenslanders?
Well, I certainly hope not. I should just stress that I am not a Labor spokesperson here tonight, and I have not been party to the discussions or policy development. But what I do know is that, I've seen firsthand in my 15 years in Parliament, there was no issue that was more brutally fought in a divisive, destructive and a really distracting way than that of climate change. And so I think what is really important is that the community and indeed our political parties need to stay focused on what do we need to do to fix this catastrophe. And in my mind, there's 2 answers. One, we need to commit to net zero by 2050. But secondly, we actually need international leadership. We need to be back on the global stage advocating and making sure that we're doing all we can to make sure that other developing countries are also reducing their reliance on coal. And sadly, Australia's not doing either of these things at the moment, but they are the 2 things that matter. They're the 2 things that will actually save the planet.
But back to the ALP policy, is coal really the middle ground?
Well, I'm not sure whether, I think that was a headline, I'm not sure that came from the Labor Party calling it a middle ground. I think what they are saying and what Chris Bowen was just saying is that we need to have really honest conversations about the transition and about the fact that there will be impacts on jobs as people reduce their reliance on coal. But we also need to work with those workers and have a focus on protecting and helping transition jobs. So, it's not an easy answer, but I don't think the middle ground talk is helpful. I think that we all need to get on the one page on net zero and actually an international effort. At the moment, Australia's still being shunned from international negotiations, which is deeply embarrassing and unhelpful.
Faye, how do you see it? It is obviously a crude polarity to talk about, coal in one corner and climate in the other corner when you're transitioning. But we are fully aware of what industry's view of coal is and where the market is lying on coal and what the future of coal is. What do you make of the ALP policy here?
I think we have to remember what was in the news, which was covered by the Australian and the West Australian, so not necessarily the most unbiased sources, is that Labor basically made a commitment not to fight coal. It was successfully wedged in 2019 at the federal election by the coalition turning a conversation about coal into or energy and mining extraction into a conversation about jobs. And Labor's just said, we're not going to die on that hill anymore. We're going to accept the fact that in actual fact, the global markets will make the decision about whether or not we have a viable coal future. But in the interim, we're going to make sure that the people who are employed in that industry actually have a successful employment plan going forward, rather than just, it's very convenient for disruptors to not care about the sectors you're disrupting, but in actual fact, they're real people. And Labor's saying they're real people who need a transition. Whether you want to turn that into a euphemistic word, it's a reality. You need to get them from the jobs they've got today to the potential jobs they can have in 10 years' time.
And what does it mean kind of for leadership when it comes to this? Because Chris Bowen was on, he was emphatic today that the states will make a decision about the new coal mines, that the states are moving ahead with their own zero net emissions and industry have their own targets. Is that choosing kind of not to take the fight on because others will do it?
Exactly. You don't have to die on every hill. And they're just saying quite rationally, it is not a mutually exclusive conversation. Coal and climate change are not disconnected. But they need to have a strategy that deals with both. And coal equals jobs. Climate change needs to also equal future jobs. And that's what they're saying in the actual policy if you read it.
Now, what about the coalition position when it comes to climate, Craig? Because, I mean, as Kate has mentioned, we've been excluded from international dialogue when it comes to, how to deal with the effects of climate. We have the opposition leader in WA saying, coal is certainly not the answer. He wasn't electorally successful, but nonetheless garnered a lot of attention for that. We have New South Wales moving ahead with renewables and some uncertainty at the federal stage who had, at the federal level, who've always had problems in getting unanimous support on any kind of coherent plan.
Sounds like
Where does that leave
national
us?
cabinet.
Or leadership.
Absolutely. Look, I agree with a lot of the things that Faye has said. You don't need to die on the hill on these issues, but I think that you also can't be hypocritical about it either. When you've got Labor on the one hand pressing the federal government on issues of coal mining and trying to connect both, the elimination of coal mining and climate change. Look, I'm a person who thinks that we should get to net zero by 2050. It doesn't mean that we can't continue to save jobs and continue to create jobs where coal mining has been. Let's remember that in that area where the by-election is in New South Wales, 50% of the jobs in Singleton are in coal mining. So the devastation on families and the economy is enormous. So let's look towards that 30-year transition of how do we reduce the reliance on coal while recognising that it's going to be there. There's still a worldwide market. It is decreasing. There will be a market-driven outcome to this. And I think the coalition, honestly, in my view, my friends in the party are saying we need to head towards a net zero by 2050. I think that's where we will end up. It's this balancing act.
Do we have the plan for that? I mean, there's the transition for coal is one thing, and then the other is actually moving towards renewable energy. But I want to ask Grace something, which is one of the things that Madeleine King spoke about was we need to end this, coal versus climate thing, and we need to end, her actual words were, the climate wars. What do you make of that?
Well, I think that much like the issue that I speak to, and that's sexual abuse, this issue is far too important to be politicised. And I agree with a lot of what Kate said. We need to be having honest conversations about how serious this issue is.
All right.